Dog won't stop barking at the statue of Mary during Mass. Everyone turned pale. The quaint chapel of Silver Creek stood peacefully against the backdrop of a crisp autumn morning. Sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows, casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the worn wooden pews. As the clock struck 9, the familiar chime of bells called the townsfolk to their Sunday worship. Among the congregation filing into the chapel was Eleanor Simmons, a retired schoolteacher, her wrinkled hand gently guiding Max, her loyal golden retriever. Max was well known in Silver Creek for his calm demeanor, often lying quietly at Eleanor's feet during services. "Good morning, Eleanor," Reverend Michael greeted warmly as they entered. "And hello to you too, Max." The dog's tail wagged gently as the Reverend patted his head. Eleanor smiled. "Good morning, Reverend. It's a beautiful day for worship, isn't it?" As the parishioners settled into their seats, a sense of tranquility descended upon the chapel. Reverend Michael began the service, his soothing voice reciting familiar prayers. Everything seemed perfectly normal until he reached the first hymn. Just as the congregation began to sing, a sharp bark pierced through the melody. Heads turned in surprise to see Max, usually the epitome of calm, standing rigid in the aisle. His eyes fixed on something at the front of the chapel. Eleanor tugged gently on his leash. "Max, hush now," she whispered, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. But Max didn't hush. Instead, he barked again, louder this time. His eyes never left the altar, where a new statue of the Virgin Mary stood, recently donated by an anonymous benefactor. Reverend Michael paused mid-verse, his brow furrowed in concern. "Is everything all right, Eleanor?" Before she could answer, Max let out a low, menacing growl. The sound was so uncharacteristic of the gentle dog that a collective gasp rippled through the congregation. Children clutched at their parents, arms, and even the usually stoic church elders shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Eleanor stood, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Reverend. I don't know what's gotten into him. Max, come now. We're leaving." But as she tugged on the leash, Max planted his paws firmly on the ground, refusing to budge. His growl intensified, and he began to bark incessantly, each sound echoing off the chapel walls like a thunderclap. Reverend Michael descended from the pulpit, his face a mask of concern. "Perhaps we should all step outside for a moment," he suggested, his voice calm despite the growing tension in the room. As the congregation began to file out, murmuring in confusion and alarm, a sudden chill swept through the chapel. The candles flickered as if caught in a breeze, though all the windows were closed. The new statue of Mary seemed to loom larger in the wavering light, its serene face taking on an almost ominous cast. Max's barking reached a fever pitch, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. The dog whimpered once, then pressed himself against Eleanor's legs, trembling. Outside, the bewildered parishioners gathered in small groups, their voices a mix of concern and speculation. Eleanor stood apart, stroking Max's head soothingly, while Reverend Michael tried to restore calm. "Friends," he addressed the crowd, "I know this is unusual, but let's not let it disturb our faith or our community. Perhaps Max was simply startled by something. We'll resume our service shortly." But as the words left his mouth, the chapel bell began to toll, its deep, resonant sound filling the air. All eyes turned to the bell tower in shock. It was barely past 10 in the morning, nowhere near the usual time for the bell to ring. As the final tone faded away, a heavy silence fell over Silver Creek. In that moment, standing in the shadow of their beloved chapel, the townspeople shared a collective shiver of unease. Something had changed in their peaceful community, and deep down, they all sensed that this was only the beginning. Reverend Michael's gaze lingered on the chapel door, his mind racing with questions. As a man of faith, he had always believed in the power of rational explanation, but the events of this morning defied logic. With a deep breath, he turned back to his flock, forcing a reassuring smile. "Let's reconvene inside," he said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty he felt. "After all, our faith is strongest when tested." As the congregation hesitantly made their way back into the chapel, Eleanor knelt beside Max, who was still trembling. "What did you see, old boy?" she whispered, her eyes darting towards the statue of Mary. For a brief moment, she could have sworn the statue's eyes met hers, but she quickly dismissed the thought. Little did Eleanor, Reverend Michael, or any of the residents of Silver Creek know that this Sunday morning was just the beginning. The events that would unfold in the coming days would test their faith, their relationships, and their understanding of the world in ways they could never have imagined. As the chapel door closed behind the last parishioner, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper seemed to echo through the empty yard. It has begun. The events of that fateful Sunday morning spread through Silver Creek like wildfire. By Monday afternoon, the entire town was abuzz with speculation and whispered conversations. At the Silver Spoon Diner, the usual lunchtime chatter was replaced by hushed discussions of the previous day's incident. Marge, the owner and head waitress, found herself refilling coffee cups more frequently than usual as patrons lingered over their meals, eager to share their theories. "I'm telling you, it's a sign," declared old Mr. Johnson, his weathered hands wrapped around a steaming mug. "That dog sensed something we couldn't. Animals have a sixth sense for these things." Sarah, the young librarian, rolled her eyes. "Or maybe the poor thing just had an upset stomach. Not everything has to be supernatural, you know." Before Mr. Johnson could retort, the diner's bell chimed as Eleanor entered, sans Max. All eyes turned to her, conversations faltering. Eleanor felt the weight of their stares as she made her way to the counter. "The usual—" "Eleanor?" Marge asked, trying to sound casual. Eleanor nodded, her usually bright eyes clouded with worry. "Yes, please. And maybe a few extra bacon strips for Max. He hasn't been himself since yesterday." As Marge busied herself with the order, Sarah approached Eleanor. "How is Max doing? That must have been quite a scare yesterday." Eleanor sighed, her shoulders sagging. "He's different, restless. He spent all night staring out the window towards the chapel. I've never seen him like this." A hush fell over the diner as Eleanor spoke. Even those who had dismissed the incident as mere coincidence found themselves unnerved by the change in the town's most even-tempered canine. Just then, the diner's ancient TV flickered to life, the local news jingle catching everyone's attention. The anchor, looking somewhat flustered, began to speak. "Good afternoon, Silver Creek. We've received numerous reports of strange occurrences around town since yesterday's incident at the chapel. Residents near St. Augustine's have reported hearing unexplained noises late at night, and several people claim to have seen shadows moving in the chapel windows after hours. Local authorities assure us there's a logical explanation, but advise residents to remain vigilant." The diner erupted into a flurry of whispers. Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine, remembering Max's behavior the night before. As she left the diner with her takeout, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The usually friendly faces of her neighbors now seemed masked with suspicion and fear. The comforting familiarity of Silver Creek had been replaced by an atmosphere of unease. Meanwhile, at the chapel, Reverend Michael was dealing with his own set of problems. Since Sunday, he'd been inundated with calls and visits from concerned parishioners. Some demanded explanations, others sought reassurance, and a few even suggested exorcism. As he sat in his office, poring over the chapel's historical records for any mention of similar incidents, a soft knock at the door interrupted his research. "Come in," he called, grateful for the distraction. The door creaked open to reveal Maria Vasquez, the chapel's caretaker. Her usually cheerful face was etched with worry. "Reverend," she began hesitantly, "I think you need to see this." Curious, Reverend Michael followed Maria to the main chapel area. As they approached the altar, he gasped. The new statue of Mary, which had been the focus of Max's unusual behavior, was now covered in a fine web of cracks. They spread across the statue's serene face like delicate spider webs, giving it an eerily lifelike appearance. "I swear it wasn't like this morning," Maria said, her voice trembling. "I was cleaning here just a few hours ago, and it was perfect." Reverend Michael reached out to touch the statue, then quickly withdrew his hand. The surface was ice cold, much colder than the surrounding air. "Thank you for showing me this, Maria," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Please don't mention this to anyone else for now. We don't want to cause any more panic." As Maria nodded and hurried away, Reverend Michael stood alone before the altered statue. For the first time in his career, he felt a flicker of doubt in his unwavering faith. What was happening to his beloved chapel, to his community? Outside, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Silver Creek. As darkness fell, an unusual mist began to form around the chapel grounds, thicker than anyone in town could remember seeing before. In houses throughout Silver Creek, curtains were drawn tight, doors were locked, and parents held their children close. In her cottage on the edge of town, Eleanor sat by the window, absently stroking Max's fur. The dog's eyes remained fixed on the distant silhouette of the chapel, barely visible through the mist. As the last light faded from the sky, a long, mournful howl echoed through the night, sending shivers down the spines of all who heard it. Silver Creek had always been a town of simple faith and quiet lives. But as the residents settled into an uneasy sleep that night, one question lingered in every mind. What dark forces had been awakened in their peaceful community, and what would tomorrow bring? As dawn broke over Silver Creek, Reverend Michael found himself already awake, having spent a restless night tossing and turning. The events of the past 2 days weighed heavily on his mind, and he knew that his congregation would be looking to him for answers he didn't have. With a weary sigh, he made his way to the chapel, hoping that the early morning solitude would bring some clarity. As he approached, he noticed the mist from the night before still lingered, clinging to the ground like a spectral carpet. Entering the chapel, Reverend Michael was struck by an oppressive silence. The usual sense of peace he felt within these walls was noticeably absent. His footsteps echoed ominously as he made his way to the altar, where the cracked statue of Mary stood vigil. To his shock, the cracks had spread further overnight. The statue's once serene face now bore an expression that could almost be described as anguished. Reverend Michael felt a chill run down his spine as he stared into its eyes, which seemed to follow him as he moved. Shaking off his unease, he retreated to his office. He knew he needed to find answers, and fast. The town was looking to him for guidance, and he couldn't let them down. As he rummaged through old files and dusty books, a faded leather-bound journal caught his eye. He had never noticed it before, tucked away as it was behind a stack of hymnals. The journal was old, its pages yellow and brittle with age. With trembling hands, Reverend Michael opened the journal. The inscription on the first page made his heart skip a beat. Personal account of Father Thomas Green, 1924. As he delved into the journal, Reverend Michael's eyes widened with each passing page. Father Green described a series of events eerily similar to what Silver Creek was experiencing now. A statue that seemed to change, unexplained noises, a pervasive sense of unease gripping the town. One passage, in particular, stood out. On May 15, 1924, the dog's reaction to the statue was most unsettling. I fear it senses something beyond our mortal perception. The mist that surrounds the chapel grows thicker each night. I dare not speak of my suspicions to the congregation, lest I be deemed a madman, but I cannot shake the feeling that something ancient and powerful has awakened in our midst. Reverend Michael's hands shook as he read on. Father Green's entries became increasingly frantic, describing escalating phenomena that mirrored the current situation in Silver Creek with uncanny accuracy. Just as he was about to turn to the final entry, a loud crash from the main chapel area startled him. Heart pounding, Reverend Michael rushed out of his office. The sight that greeted him made him gasp in disbelief. The statue of Mary lay shattered on the floor, fragments of porcelain scattered across the altar steps. But it wasn't the destruction that made Reverend Michael's blood run cold. It was what he saw amidst the debris. There, where the statue's base had been, was a small, ancient-looking box. It seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and Reverend Michael could have sworn he heard it whispering. As he stood there, frozen in shock, the chapel door burst open. Eleanor rushed in, her face pale with fear. "Reverend," she cried, "it's Max. He's gone." I woke up and he was nowhere to be found. I've been searching all morning, and then I saw the mist around the chapel and I thought... Her voice trailed off as she took in the scene before her, the shattered statue, the mysterious box, and the Reverend's ashen face. "What's happening, Reverend?" Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling. "What's happening to our town?" Reverend Michael looked from Eleanor to the box, his mind racing. He knew that whatever was in that box was the key to understanding the strange events plaguing Silver Creek, but he also knew that opening it could unleash forces beyond their comprehension. As if sensing his thoughts, a gust of wind swept through the chapel, extinguishing the candles and plunging them into semi-darkness. The whispers from the box grew louder, almost intelligible now. Reverend Michael realized he was at a crossroads. His next decision would shape not just his fate, but the fate of the entire town. With a deep breath, he reached for the box, knowing that once he touched it, there would be no turning back. "Eleanor," he said, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil, "I think it's time we uncover the truth about Silver Creek's past. Whatever happens next, we face it together." As his fingers closed around the box, a surge of energy pulsed through the chapel. Outside, the mist thickened, obscuring the town from view. In houses across Silver Creek, lights flickered, and those who were awake felt a strange sensation, as if the very fabric of reality was shifting. The stage was set for revelations that would shake the foundations of Silver Creek and test the faith and resolve of its residents in ways they could never have imagined. As Reverend Michael's fingers made contact with the mysterious box, a jolt of energy surged through his body. The air in the chapel seemed to crackle with an otherworldly electricity. Eleanor gasped, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. "Reverend, are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael nodded solemnly. "We need answers, Eleanor. Whatever is in this box, it's connected to everything that's been happening." With trembling hands, he lifted the box from amidst the shattered remains of the statue. It was surprisingly light, made of a dark wood that seemed to absorb the light around it. Intricate carvings adorned its surface, depicting scenes that seemed to shift and change as they watched. Just as Michael was about to open it, a commotion outside caught their attention. The chapel doors burst open, and Sarah, the librarian, rushed in, her face flushed with excitement and fear. "Reverend, Eleanor, you won't believe what I found," she exclaimed, clutching a stack of old newspapers to her chest. Her eyes darted to the box in Michael's hands, and she faltered. What is that?" Michael and Eleanor exchanged glances. "We're not sure yet," Michael admitted. "But what have you found, Sarah?" Sarah spread the newspapers on a nearby pew, her hands shaking slightly. "I've been researching the town's history, trying to find any mention of similar events. And I found these." The trio leaned in, examining the yellowed pages. The headlines screamed of strange occurrences in Silver Creek, dating back nearly a century, mysterious mists, unexplained animal behavior, and whispers of ancient secrets buried beneath the town. One article in particular caught Eleanor's eye. "Local dog leads to discovery of hidden crypt," she read aloud. In 1924, a dog named Biscuit led his owner to a previously unknown crypt beneath St. Augustine's Chapel. The crypt was sealed by town officials before its contents could be examined. Michael's face paled. 1924. That's the same year as Father Green's journal entries. As if on cue, a low, mournful howl echoed from somewhere beneath their feet. Eleanor's head snapped up. "Max!" she exclaimed. "He must be down there." Before anyone could stop her, Eleanor was rushing towards the altar, searching for any sign of a hidden entrance. Michael and Sarah hurried after her. The mysterious box still clutched in Michael's hands. As they reached the altar, the floor beneath them began to tremble. With a grinding noise, a section of the stone floor slid away, revealing a dark staircase descending into the earth. The three stood at the edge of the opening, peering into the darkness below. The howling grew louder, more urgent. "We have to go down there," Eleanor insisted. "Max needs me." Michael nodded grimly. "Whatever answers we seek, I believe we'll find them down there. But we must be cautious. We don't know what we're dealing with." Sarah pulled out her phone, turning on its flashlight. "I'm coming too," she said firmly. "We're in this together." As they descended the stairs, the air grew colder and heavier. The walls were lined with strange symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. The box in Michael's hands grew warmer, almost pulsing in rhythm with their heartbeats. They reached the bottom of the stairs and found themselves in a large circular chamber. Ancient artifacts and crumbling texts lined the walls. In the center of the room stood a stone altar, and atop it, "Max!" Eleanor cried, rushing forward. The golden retriever wagged his tail weakly, whimpering as his owner approached. But something was wrong. Max's eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and he seemed unable to move from the altar. As Eleanor reached for her dog, a voice echoed through the chamber, stopping her in her tracks. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," the voice said, smooth as silk, but cold as ice. From the shadows emerged a figure they all recognized, Mr. Johnson, the old man from the diner. But he looked different now, younger somehow, his eyes glowing with the same unnatural light as Max's. "Welcome," he said, spreading his arms wide. "Welcome to the true heart of Silver Creek. I've been waiting a long time for this moment." Michael stepped forward, the box in his hands growing almost unbearably hot. "Who are you?" he demanded. "What have you done to Max?" Mr. Johnson, or whoever he truly was, smiled, a chilling sight. "Who I am is not important. What matters is what I represent. Magic. Power. The old ways that your precious faith has tried so hard to bury." He gestured to the box in Michael's hands. "That box contains a fragment of an ancient power, one that has slumbered beneath this town for centuries. And now, thanks to your meddling, it's finally awakening." As if in response, the box began to shake violently. Michael struggled to hold onto it as tendrils of dark energy began to seep from its seams. Sarah grabbed Michael's arm. "Don't open it," she cried. "Whatever's inside, it's too dangerous." But it was too late. With a sound like thunder, the box burst open, releasing a swirling vortex of shadows and whispers. The chamber filled with another worldly wind, whipping around them with increasing fury. In the chaos, Max leaped from the altar, the glow fading from his eyes. He rushed to Eleanor's side, barking frantically. Mr. Johnson's laughter echoed over the howling wind. "At last," he cried, "the power of the ancients is unleashed once more." As the shadows swirled around them, Michael, Eleanor, Sarah and Max huddled together, facing an ancient evil that threatened not just Silver Creek, but perhaps the entire world. The true test of their faith, courage, and unity was about to begin. As the chaotic wind whipped around them, Reverend Michael clutched the remnants of the box tightly. Through the maelstrom, he caught glimpses of pages from Father Green's diary fluttering in the air, their secrets finally revealed in the swirling, mystical energy. A shimmer of light began to form around them, pushing back against the darkness. Mr. Johnson's triumphant laughter faltered. "What are you doing?" he snarled, his face contorting with rage. Michael's voice rang out, clear and strong. "In unity, there is strength. In faith, there is power." As he spoke these words, the pages of Father Green's diary swirled faster, coalescing into a glowing sphere of knowledge. Suddenly, Michael could see and understand everything written within. "I know what happened here," he gasped. "Father Green, he didn't just discover the crypt, he sealed away an ancient evil." Sarah's eyes widened. "The crypt? It's a containment chamber." Eleanor, still holding tightly to her friend's hands, called out to Mr. Johnson. "Who are you really? What do you want with our town?" The old man's form seemed to flicker, revealing glimpses of something far older and more sinister. "I am the guardian of the old ways," he hissed. "For centuries, I've waited for someone foolish enough to release me. Your quaint little faith is nothing compared to the power I wield." But as he spoke, the glowing sphere of Father Green's memories pulsed brightly. Michael's voice took on a resonant quality, as if Father Green himself was speaking through him. "You are mistaken," Michael and Father Green's voice said in unison. "True faith is not about power. It's about love, community, and the strength we find in each other." The swirling energy in the room began to change, the malevolent darkness retreating as warm, golden light emanated from the joined hands of Michael, Sarah, and Eleanor. "Mr. Johnson howled in frustration. "No, you can't stop what's already begun." But his words were drowned out by a new sound, barking. Max, his eyes now clear and determined, stood facing the ancient entity. One by one, more barks joined in, echoing from above. The dogs of Silver Creek, led by some primal instinct, had gathered at the chapel, lending their voices to the struggle below. The combined force of the town's unity, the unyielding faith of its people, and the pure, innocent strength of its animals began to overwhelm the dark power. Mr. Johnson's form wavered, his true nature revealed, a writhing mass of shadows and ancient malice. "Quick!" Sarah shouted. "The altar! It's the key to sealing the crypt!" With a shared look of determination, the trio moved towards the stone altar, never breaking their circle. Max trotted alongside them, a loyal guardian. As they reached the altar, Michael placed what remained of the box upon it. The swirling pages of Father Green's diary wrapped around the box, forming a new seal. "By the power of faith, love, and community," Michael intoned, his voice blending with the echoes of Father Green, "we banish you from Silver Creek. Return to your slumber and trouble our town no more." A blinding flash of light erupted from the altar, the shadow creature that was once Mr. Johnson let out an unearthly shriek as it was pulled towards the box. In a matter of seconds, it was gone, sealed away once more. As the light faded and the wind died down, the four found themselves standing in the now quiet crypt. The air felt cleaner somehow, as if a great weight had been lifted. Eleanor knelt down, hugging Max tightly. "You brave, wonderful boy," she whispered, tears in her eyes. Sarah looked around in awe. What just happened? Our faith in each other that won the day. As they made their way back up the stairs to the chapel, they could hear the excited barks of the dogs above and the murmur of a gathering crowd. News of the strange events had spread, and it seemed all of Silver Creek had come to the chapel. Emerging into the morning light, Michael, Sarah, Eleanor, and Max were met with a sea of concerned and curious faces. The mist that had shrouded the town was gone, and the air was filled with a sense of renewal. Michael stepped forward, ready to address the crowd, but as he opened his mouth to speak, he realized that the story of what had happened below might be too fantastic for many to believe. How could he explain the battle between ancient magic and the power of faith? As he hesitated, Eleanor placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "Tell them the truth," she said softly. "Our town has always valued honesty. They deserve to know what happened." Sarah nodded in agreement. "And we'll be right here with you. After all, we're stronger together." Taking a deep breath, Michael began to speak, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd. "My friends, neighbors, members of our beloved Silver Creek community, we've just faced a trial unlike any our town has seen before." As he recounted the events in the crypt, Michael could see a mix of emotions on the faces before him: disbelief, wonder, and ultimately, a growing sense of pride and unity. The people of Silver Creek had always known their town was special, but now they understood just how true that was. When Michael finished his tale, a moment of silence fell over the crowd. Then slowly at first, but with growing enthusiasm, applause broke out. The people of Silver Creek were celebrating not just their deliverance from an ancient evil, but the strength of their community and the power of their shared faith. As the applause died down, Michael raised his hands for silence. "We've been through much, but our trial is not yet over. The seal in the crypt is restored, but it will need protection. We must come together as a community to ensure that what happened here never occurs again." The crowd murmured in agreement, already beginning to discuss plans for guarding their town's secret. As the excitement of the morning's events began to settle, Michael, Sarah, Eleanor, and Max shared a quiet moment away from the crowd. They knew that life in Silver Creek would never be quite the same, but they also knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The sun climbed higher in the sky, shining down on Silver Creek, a town that now stood not just as a quiet community, but as guardians of an ancient secret, united in faith and friendship. In the weeks following the dramatic events at the chapel, Silver Creek found itself grappling with its new reality. The initial unity that had brought the town together in the face of an ancient evil began to fray as the implications of their shared secret sank in. The town council, led by the pragmatic Mayor Thompson, called for an emergency meeting to discuss how to move forward. The chapel's basement was sealed off, with only Reverend Michael, Sarah, and Eleanor allowed access. This decision, while meant to protect the town, sparked controversy and whispers of favoritism. On a crisp autumn evening, the town hall was packed to capacity. The air buzzed with tension as Mayor Thompson called the meeting to order. "Friends and neighbors," he began, his voice grave, "we're here to discuss the future of Silver Creek in light of recent revelations." From her seat near the front, Eleanor felt the weight of stares on her back. She could hear the whispers, some awed, some suspicious. Max, ever loyal, sat at her feet, occasionally letting out a low whine as if sensing the tension in the room. Reverend Michael stood to address the crowd. "I know many of you are frightened and confused, but we must remember that it was our unity, our shared faith and love for this town, that saved us. We can't let fear divide us now." But not everyone was convinced. Harold Jenkins, the owner of the local hardware store, stood up abruptly. "And who's to say this ancient evil won't come back? Are we supposed to just trust that you three can keep us safe? What if one of you is corrupted by this power?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Sarah, usually quiet in such gatherings, found herself compelled to speak up. "We're not guardians or chosen ones," she said, her voice trembling slightly but growing stronger. "We're just members of this community, like all of you. The power that protected Silver Creek came from all of us, not just the three of us." Mayor Thompson nodded. "Which is why we need to decide as a community how to move forward. Do we keep this a secret from the outside world? Do we bring in experts? What about the tourists who come for our autumn festival?" The discussion that followed was heated. Some, like young tech entrepreneur Jake Martinez, saw opportunity in their unique situation. "Think about it," he argued. "We could put Silver Creek on the map, the town that battled evil. Imagine the tourism." Others, like elderly Mrs. Fitzgerald, were horrified at the idea. "This isn't some sideshow attraction," she exclaimed. "It's a sacred trust. We need to protect our town, not exploit it." As the debate raged on, Eleanor noticed Max becoming increasingly agitated. The dog's ears were perked, his gaze fixed on the window. Following his line of sight, Eleanor gasped. "Look!" she cried out, pointing. "The mist! It's back!" The room fell silent as everyone turned to look. Sure enough, a thick, unnatural mist was rolling in, encircling the town hall. Panic began to spread through the crowd. "It's happening again!" someone shouted. "We're doomed!" Reverend Michael raised his hands, calling for calm. "Remember what we learned. Our strength is in our unity. We must stand together." But the fear was palpable. As people rushed to the windows, families huddled together, and accusations flew. The town's newfound unity began to crumble. In the chaos, Sarah noticed something strange. The mist seemed to be reacting to the discord in the room, growing thicker and more menacing with each angry outburst. "Wait," she shouted above the din. "Look at the mist. It's feeding off our fear and division." Her words cut through the panic, and slowly, people began to take notice. The connection was undeniable. Every argument seemed to make the mist press closer, while moments of cooperation caused it to retreat slightly. Mayor Thompson, seeing an opportunity, spoke up. "Folks, it seems we have a choice to make. We can give in to fear and suspicion, or we can choose to trust in each other and in the strength that saved us before." Eleanor stood, her voice clear and determined. "We are Silver Creek. This town has stood for generations. Through good times and bad, we've always come together when it mattered most. This is one of those times." One by one, people in the crowd began to nod in agreement. Old grudges were set aside, and hands reached out in reconciliation. As the atmosphere in the town hall shifted from fear to determination, the mist outside began to thin. Max, his tail wagging now, let out a joyful bark that seemed to break the last of the tension. Reverend Michael, a smile of relief on his face, addressed the crowd once more. "My friends, I think we've just witnessed another miracle. Our town's true strength isn't in any ancient power or secret knowledge. It's in our bonds with each other, in our willingness to stand together in the face of adversity." As the mist dissipated entirely, revealing a clear, star-filled sky, the people of Silver Creek found themselves united once more. They had faced a test perhaps even greater than the battle in the crypt, the test of maintaining their unity in the face of fear and uncertainty. The meeting continued late into the night, but now with a spirit of cooperation and shared purpose. Plans were made to protect their secret while also using their unique history to bring the community even closer together. As the townspeople finally began to disperse, tired but resolute, Eleanor knelt down to ruffle Max's fur. "I'm good, boy," she whispered. "You knew all along, didn't you, that we're stronger together?" The dog's happy bark seemed to echo through the night, a joyful affirmation of Silver Creek's renewed spirit. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as one. As autumn gave way to winter, Silver Creek settled into a new normal. The town's secret was guarded carefully, with a rotating schedule of volunteers keeping watch over the chapel's crypt. The autumn festival had come and gone without incident, though many visitors remarked on the town's unusually close-knit atmosphere. On a chilly December evening, as the first snowflakes of the season began to fall, Reverend Michael found himself alone in the chapel, poring over Father Green's diary. Despite the months that had passed, he still felt there were mysteries hidden within its pages. As he turned a particularly weathered page, a small, folded note fell out. With trembling hands, Michael unfolded it, revealing a message written in faded ink. "To whoever finds this, the true test is yet to come. On the winter solstice, when night is longest, the veil will be at its thinnest. Be prepared. Trust in each other. The key lies in the heart of the town." Michael's heart raced. The winter solstice was just days away. He reached for his phone to call Eleanor and Sarah, but before he could dial, the chapel doors burst open. Eleanor rushed in, her face pale with worry, Max at her heels. "Michael, something's happening. The dogs, they're acting strange again." As if to emphasize her point, Max let out a low, mournful howl. Outside, they could hear other dogs joining in, their cries echoing through the night. Sarah arrived moments later, clutching an ancient-looking map. "I found this hidden in one of the old books at the library," she explained breathlessly. As they discussed their findings, a soft glow began to emanate from the crypt below. The air grew heavy with an otherworldly energy, and the temperature in the chapel plummeted. "We need to warn the town," Eleanor said, her voice filled with determination. "Whatever's coming, we face it together." Within hours, word had spread throughout Silver Creek. Despite the late hour and falling snow, people gathered in the town square, their faces a mix of fear and resolve. Mayor Thompson stood atop the gazebo, his voice carrying over the murmuring crowd. "Friends, we've faced challenges before, and we've overcome them through unity and faith in each other. Tonight, we stand together once again." As the clock tower began to strike midnight, marking the start of the winter solstice, a tremor ran through the ground. The snow-covered cobblestones of the town square began to shift and separate, revealing a hidden staircase descending into darkness. Reverend Michael, Eleanor, and Sarah exchanged glances. They knew they had to lead the way. As they approached the staircase, Max trotted ahead, his tail held high as if sensing the importance of the moment. "Whatever we find down there," Michael addressed the crowd, "remember that our strength lies in our unity. Stay close, stay calm, and have faith." As they descended the stairs, followed by a group of brave volunteers, the air grew thick with ancient magic. The walls of the tunnel were covered in symbols similar to those in the chapel's crypt, glowing faintly in the darkness. They emerged into a vast underground chamber, far larger than seemed possible. In the center stood an ornate pedestal, upon which rested a softly glowing orb. "The heart of the town," Sarah whispered in awe. As they approached the pedestal, the orb pulsed with energy. Ghostly figures began to materialize around them, spectral forms of Silver Creek's past residents watching silently. A familiar voice echoed through the chamber. "You have come at last, Mr. Johnson." Or rather, the entity that had taken his form as appeared before them. But this time, he seemed less menacing, almost sorrowful. "What you see before you is the true heart of Silver Creek," he explained. "A nexus of ancient power, guarded by your town for generations. I am its keeper, bound to test each generation's worthiness." The revelation stunned the gathered townspeople. Their home, their seemingly ordinary little town, had been safeguarding an ancient power all along. But why the deception? Michael asked. Why the threats? The entity's form shifted, showing glimpses of all those who had served as its vessel over the centuries. The power here is great and dangerous in the wrong hands. Each generation must prove their unity, their faith in each other, to continue as its guardians. You have faced your trials admirably. Eleanor stepped forward, Max at her side. So what happens now? The entity gestured to the orb. Now you must make a choice. This power can be used to protect and prosper, or it can be sealed away, hidden from the world, but know that either choice comes with great responsibility. The people of Silver Creek looked to one another, a silent communication born of shared trials and deep bonds. Mayor Thompson spoke for them all. We choose to protect it, as our ancestors did. We will be its guardians, not its masters. As he spoke these words, the orb's glow intensified. The spectral figures around them nodded in approval before fading away. The entity that had been Mr. Johnson smiled, its form dissolving into motes of light that merged with the orb. The chamber filled with a warm, comforting light. Each person present felt a connection to the heart of Silver Creek, a bond that ran deeper than mere residency. As they made their way back to the surface, the air felt cleaner, crisper. The snow had stopped, and the stars shone with unusual brightness. Silver Creek felt renewed, its hidden heart now beating in sync with its people. Reverend Michael addressed the gathered townspeople one last time that night. We've been entrusted with a great gift and an equally great responsibility. Our town's strength has always been in its people, in our bonds with each other. Now, more than ever, we must nurture those bonds. As the crowd dispersed, heading home with a newfound sense of purpose, Eleanor knelt beside Max, scratching behind his ears. You knew all along, didn't you, boy, that there was magic in our little town? Max's happy bark seemed to say, Of course I did. It's been here all along in the love we share. Sarah and Michael joined them, and the four looked out over their transformed town. The secrets of Silver Creek had been revealed, but its true magic, the unbreakable spirit of its community, had been there all along, waiting to be rediscovered. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Silver Creek stood ready to face whatever the future might bring, united in purpose and stronger than ever before. As spring blossomed in Silver Creek, the town had settled into a new rhythm. The events of the winter solstice had transformed not just the town's understanding of itself, but the very fabric of daily life. The hidden heart beneath the square pulsed with a gentle energy that seemed to infuse everything with a subtle vibrancy. On a bright Sunday morning, Reverend Michael stood at the pulpit of St. Augustine's Chapel, looking out over his congregation. The pews were fuller than ever, not just with long-time residents, but with newcomers drawn to the town's newfound reputation for warmth and community spirit. My friends, Michael began, his voice carrying easily through the sunlit chapel, we've been through much together. We've faced fears, uncovered secrets, and found strength we never knew we had. But our greatest challenge lies not behind us, but ahead. Eleanor, seated in the front pew with Max at her feet, nodded in agreement. Sarah, now officially the town's historian, sat nearby, her notebook open as always. Michael continued, Our task now is not just to guard a secret, but to live up to the trust placed in us, to be worthy of the heart that beats beneath our feet. As he spoke, a soft glow seemed to emanate from the floor of the chapel, as if in response to his words. The congregation murmured in awe, still not entirely used to such manifestations. But let us not forget, Michael said, raising his voice slightly, that the true magic of Silver Creek isn't in ancient artifacts or hidden chambers. It's in each of us, in the bonds we share, in the community we build every day. After the service, as people mingled in the chapel yard, there was a palpable sense of purpose and unity. Old grievances had been set aside, replaced by a shared commitment to their town's unique legacy. Mayor Thompson, chatting with a group near the gate, was outlining plans for the upcoming summer festival. We'll celebrate our history, he was saying, but also look to the future. Silver Creek has a chance to be a beacon of hope and unity in these divided times. Eleanor, meanwhile, had noticed Max behaving oddly again. The dog was sniffing intently at a patch of ground near the chapel wall. As she approached, she saw a small sapling pushing its way through the soil, in exactly the spot where the statue of Mary had once stood. "Michael, Sarah," she called out. "Come look at this." As they gathered around the tiny tree, Sarah consulted her ever-present notebook. "It's a rowan tree," she said with wonder. "In many traditions, it's associated with protection and healing." Reverend Michael knelt down, gently touching the sapling's leaves. "A sign, perhaps," he mused, "that our guardianship extends not just to ancient powers, but to the natural world around us." As word spread, more townspeople gathered to see the miraculous sapling. Someone started humming a hymn, and soon others joined in, their voices blending in harmony. In that moment, as the sun shone down on the little rowan tree and the gathered townspeople, there was a sense of everything coming full circle. The trials they had faced, the secrets they had uncovered, all of it had led to this, a renewal of faith, not just in the divine, but in each other and in the power of community. As the impromptu choir's voices rose, Max let out a joyful bark. As if adding his own voice to the celebration, Eleanor laughed, ruffling his fur. "That's right, boy. You were the first to know something special was happening, weren't you?" Sarah, her eyes sparkling with excitement, was already jotting down notes. "This is going in the new town history for sure," she said. "The miracle of the rowan tree, a new chapter for Silver Creek." Mayor Thompson, overhearing this, nodded approvingly. "A new chapter indeed. And we'll write it together, as we always have." As the day wore on and the excitement settled, Reverend Michael found himself alone in the chapel, reflecting on the journey they'd all been through. The troubles that had seemed so insurmountable months ago now felt like stepping stones that had led them to a brighter future. He thought of Father Green's diary, of the generations of Silver Creek residents who had guarded their town's secret. We won't let you down," he whispered to the empty chapel. As if in response, the gentle glow from beneath the floor pulsed once, filling the air with warmth. Outside, the town continued its Sunday routines, but with a newfound sense of purpose. Children played in the square, their laughter seeming to resonate with the hidden heart beneath. Neighbors greeted each other with genuine warmth, the bonds between them stronger than ever. Eleanor and Sarah, walking Max through the town park, paused to watch the sunset. The sky was painted in brilliant hues of orange and pink, as if nature itself was celebrating with them. "You know," Eleanor said thoughtfully, "when all this started, I was terrified. I thought our little town was under attack, but now—" Sarah finished her thought. "Now it feels like we've been given a gift." Eleanor nodded. "Exactly. A gift and a responsibility." As darkness fell, the streetlights of Silver Creek flickered to life, but they weren't alone. Tiny motes of magical light danced in the air, visible only to those who knew to look for them. It was a subtle reminder of the wonders that lay beneath the surface of their seemingly ordinary town. In homes across Silver Creek, families gathered for dinner, their conversations filled with plans for the future and reflections on their shared experiences. The sense of isolation that had once plagued the town was gone, replaced by a deep-rooted understanding that they were all part of something greater. As night settled over Silver Creek, a peace descended, not the uneasy quiet of secrets kept, but the contented silence of a community united in purpose and faith. The hidden heart of the town beat steadily, in rhythm with the lives of its people. In the chapel, Reverend Michael prepared to lock up for the night. As he reached for the light switch, he paused, looking back at the empty pews. "Thank you," he said softly, to whom he wasn't quite sure. Perhaps to the town itself, or to the generations who had come before, or simply to the mysterious forces that had brought them all together. As he stepped out into the cool night air, Michael took a deep breath, feeling the magic of Silver Creek all around him. The challenges they had faced had not weakened their faith, but strengthened it. Not just faith in the divine, but in each other and in the power of community to overcome any obstacle. The stars twinkled brightly overhead, seeming to wink down at the little town that had discovered its true heart. Silver Creek had been transformed, its people united by shared secrets and common purpose. Whatever the future might hold, they would face it together, their bonds unbreakable, their faith restored.